Habang wala kaming ginagawa, lagi akong nakatingin sa buwan. Lagi ko sinasabi na, Lord, pabilisin mo na yung araw para makauwi na kami. Kasi mukhang hindi ko nakakayanin.
China and Taiwan control the two largest distant water fishing fleets in the world, with thousands of vessels operating globally. As fish populations dwindle, illegal fishing and human rights abuses have become increasingly prevalent as operators struggle to stay profitable. Many of the vessels are crewed by migrant workers from the Philippines who are targeted by predatory recruiters with promises of good wages and living conditions. But once aboard, they are overworked, abused, and exploited while being ordered to participate in illegal fishing activities that are driving vulnerable marine ecosystems toward collapse.
May 3 akong anak. Gusto ko masuportahan na maayos. Sabi ko, maghahanap muna ako ng mabilisan para makapag-abroad.
May rasyon siya nga naglakad sa tungod siyang kapigaduhon namon. Kaysa wala na siya naglakat, gasikad lang na siya. Kag ako nagamanicure, ti sambot id kami kaayo. Sang amon niya pangabuhi.
Many crew members who end up on distant water fishing vessels come from rural provinces where work is scarce and pay is low. Recruitment agencies lure these workers with promises of high pay, but later pressure them into signing contracts that misrepresent key details, such as working hours, salary, and even the vessel they will be working on.
Filipino fishers, they are among the most vulnerable to human trafficking because a lot of them come from very poor communities. They do not have that many work opportunities. They have very little formal education. That puts them in a very ripe position to be exploited by traffickers.
Fishers have limited education attainment. For example, the contract usually is in English language and they speak another language. Probabilities are they just sign the contract, but they will never ever be able to read, to understand.
Crew have to pay for their own medical checks and training, and recruiters charge them hundreds of dollars more in fees for document processing. Many are forced to borrow to pay for upfront expenses, trapping them in a cycle of debt and financial exploitation before they even step foot on a vessel.
Sometimes it's tantamount to debt bondage because some of them, even before they are deployed, they already are indebted to the recruiter for the recruitment fees or for the other expenses that are incurred.
Pinagpipirma nila ako ng mga kontrata which is may kasamang mga waiver. Yung waiver na yun yung mga deduction sa mga sahod. Tapos, nung nalaman ko yun, sabi ko sa agency, wait lang kasi hindi ako sure dyan kasi kailangan ko munang mag-decision para sa sarili ko. Pero tinuloy ko na rin kasi yung ginastos ko nga is sayang. Pumunta ako sa agency, pumirma ako ng kontrata kasama yung mga waiver. Tapos yung nararamdaman ko rin is no choice na rin.
Hanggat makatayo ka, magtrabaho ka ba rin.
Isolated at sea, often thousands of kilometres from shore, fishers are routinely forced to work exceptionally long hours in squalid and dangerous conditions by senior crew.
Doon, pinakamataas na yung 4 na oras na makapagtulog ka. Ang masama pa doon, pag nagkasakit ka, kahit di mo kaya, hirap na hirap ka. Pag di ka magtrabaho, wala ka rin kain, hindi ka pinapakain.
Sa tubig lang po, kasi yung sa tubig namin, na iniinom namin is yung galing po talaga sa aircon, yung turo ng aircon.
Filipino, Indonesia, napagutuman nila pero kalahi nila, inasagod na anugid nila, napakaungid nila.
So those kinds of very substandard living conditions are very, very common on the fishing vessels. And we know also that many of the crew talk about experiences of abuse. So that could be verbal abuse, physical abuse. It's very difficult for the men to ask to leave the fishing vessels because they're isolated in the ocean with a lack of communication. They really can't call for help.
Milig lang po siyang manakit. Pinagbabalingan niya ng galit kasi mabagal pa po talaga ako sa trabaho as a first time. Sinasapak niya po ako, sinusuntok.
Minsan nang mabatok pa sila, wala kang lumamam kasi hawak nila yung mga passport. Hindi kami talaga makauwi.
The frequency of sickness, injuries, and accidents on board make death at sea a shockingly common occurrence.
Marami kaming nagkasakit doon. Mga naging sakit namin ay pamamanas, buong katawan. Doon sa barko, walang gamot. Maraming namatay na Indonesian, 2 Pinoy na namatay.
So sa madaming salita po, wala po talaga akong totaling ginigising nung mga roommates ko. Ginigising. Parang wala na talaga. Sabi ng kapitan, patay na daw yung kasama namin. Natigilan kami. Kapon lang magkakasama ko tapos
There have been cases where the bodies have been thrown overboard at sea or where they've been offloaded into another jurisdiction and buried in an unmarked grave. It takes this issue beyond a labour issue. It's an issue of the disposability of these men. They can be exploited and used and subject to violence, and then they're just discarded.
Alongside these human rights abuses, Filipino crew have reported being ordered to engage in harmful illegal fishing practices, such as the use of highly destructive gear and the killing of protected species. The impacts that these activities are having on marine ecosystems is devastating, with an estimated 90% of large predatory fish, such as sharks, tuna, marlin and swordfish, already lost since 1950.
Ano yung pangunahing hinuhuli ng barko?
Lahat.
Ang pangunahin pong hinuhuli doon namin ay ang mga pusit po talaga. Kaso lang po, may mga nasasagap yung net namin na mga endangered na mga species, yung bawal hulihin.
Dolphin, marami kami nahuhuling dolphin. Pag-angat, patay na.
yan sa pating ang ginawa lang po kasi namin yan is yung palikpik. Tapos yung katawan po, pinapatabon po ng kapitan sa amin.
Papasok sa lambat na yun na yung iahawid niya, ma'am. Kumbaga, kung may nasabay ba na, may pumasok ba na dolphin, pating, doon sa lambat na yun na yung kinakukuha niya, ma'am.
Once they return to land, sometimes years after departure, many crew find out that the wages their family should have been receiving in their absence have been stolen by their recruitment agency.
Sa 9 months na nagpakahirap ka sa trabaho, halos mamatay ka. Halos wala kang tulog, wala kang kain. Tapos mababaltaan mo, wala kang sahod na nakukuha. Sobrang sakit.
So hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin kami nasasahuran. Yung kaso namin, nasa arbiter. Tapos yung sabi ng arbiter, medyo may katagalan daw yung kaso namin kasi yun, medyo makunat din yung kalaban namin, yung agency.
More often than not, these cases do not proceed that far because the traffickers, they manage to convince the victims to just disappear and not pursue action.
Inisyo lang sa amin sa cheques, 79K lang po. Ang laki ng binawas. Sa akin na, sige, okay na yan para matapos yan. Para hindi dagdag isipin.
Unscrupulous recruitment agencies and vessel owners are profiting from the systematic exploitation of Filipino fishers. It's time for workers to be treated fairly and with dignity during their recruitment, while they're at sea, and when they return home.
We need global justice for fishers. We need fair, ethical ways of recruiting them, and fair and ethical labor standards implementation. The problem is the efforts are not globally aligned. Everybody should be on board here. All hands on deck, di ba?
At sa ating gobyerno naman, sana po mabigyan yung pansin ang mga hinaing ng Pilipino para may iwasan yung kagaya na naranasan namin. Mabigyan sana ng proteksyon ang mga kagaya naming fisherman. Tamang karapatan, tamang pagpapahalaga para sa kagaya naming fisherman.